we are about to get into the season. The expansion or the realignment or whatever else will always be like right here. It's going to be a part of it. That's how a lot of you found us, and we found you on this YouTube station, 365 Sports. So we're not like moving away from that. We'll be talking about that quite a bit as well. But we're going to hear in a minute from Earl High School coach Albert Coleman, his thoughts about Gary Bohannon, the conversation he had after he was named the starter.
Well, and there's certainly been developments there. I mean, it's not like the news hasn't stopped. I mean, the Pac-12 basically coming out and saying, yeah, we might have an announcement on expansion in the next 2 weeks. I mean, that's pretty notable because either they're not going to expand, and all of these Texas Tech fans and KU fans and Baylor fans and whoever else is, us to the Pac-12. I mean, we'll find out in a couple weeks, it sounds like. I think that's super notable from Kliavkoff that they're actually openly discussing, like, yeah, we're going to take a look at it. Also acknowledging that most everybody that you would think of has reached out to them in some form or fashion, not just Big 12 schools, not just the remaining 8. So, I mean, the Pac-12, which it was, I mean, honestly, like a year ago, the most laughable conference there was of the Power Five, they're now in an actual position of some power between this alliance and between kind of, holding the puppet strings to realignment's next step and how that might affect other conferences. So I think that was highly notable, and I don't know, there seems to be a lot of people that are like, oh, he's just talking and there's no need for the expansion if they have this alliance, but there's also just as many people thinking, well, hey, welcome Texas Tech and Iowa State and TCU and Kansas to the Pac-12, which I don't think's a given either. So very curious to hear a commissioner come out and just openly say that, but I get why he did, and should make for an interesting couple of weeks, especially as it pertains to the Pac-12 and obviously whatever conferences they may or may not poach from. And if they don't, well, that's a whole other thing, because that leaves the remaining 8 with one less option than they already had. We all know they're not going to in full go to the SEC. They're not all going to the Big Ten. They're not all going to the ACC. So, if the Pac-12's suddenly off the table, then, the spots start getting few and far between.
Well, and what's weird to me, and I talked about this on Friday, is if you're going to do a massive scheduling alliance with 41 teams, what's the difference in doing it with 49 teams? So what is the number to me of an alliance, and especially when a voting block, if it's a voting block to compete against the SEC, trying to do things unilaterally,
you would want more
would want more people just so that you could maybe overwhelm it, which means to me that those 3 conferences really think that the Big 12 is on even shakier ground than we realize. I mean, I don't think it's been solid at all, but there's some shaky ground there. I don't know why you wouldn't, or if they are hoping that the league craters and then they can pick off what would benefit them and let the rest, slither off into another conference.
Slither off.
I mean,
again, the reason why you wouldn't was because they don't bring any value to you. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're the Pac-12 and you add 8 teams and none of those remaining 8 teams are ones that you go, oh, they're spiking the price. None of them.
Otherwise, they would have already been contacted,
exactly,
or they would have been behind doors with the same people.
Yeah, and I see all this, like, well, TCU's got the Fort Worth market. No, they don't. No, they do not have the Fort Worth market. Or, West Virginia's got DC and all, and okay, they got the good TV ratings, but, it comes down to so many more things, and everybody's, throwing their pitch out there. But for all these valuable traits that all these 8 schools and their fan bases are saying, it still hasn't been enough to entice anybody to take any of them as of yet. Now, we could see that change. Again, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State could be Pac-12 bound for all we know in the next couple of weeks. I mean, for all we know, that could happen. But for all we know, that might not happen as well. So if you're the Pac-12, okay, yeah, it makes sense to want to get into Texas. I see Houston being thrown out there. TCU doesn't carry the Fort Worth market. Houston sure as hell doesn't carry the Houston market. The Houston market's all in the SEC now, quite frankly, with A&M and Texas and LSU. Are you kidding me? That's the Houston market, not U of H. All due respect to them. But, you got to bring something to the table, and I don't see what those 8 are bringing unless there's something that we're all missing as far as the money goes, to where they're going to all be making $10 million more if they bring these 8 teams in.
And part of it could just be the rest of the league's waiting to fall apart so that they don't have to deal with,
exit
we
fees.
promised exit fees and, Paul University promised Smokey University that we'd go together.
You know who I trust in all this?
Paul. Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
You don't. You can't. And that's not to be disrespectful. You just can't.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, Kliavkoff also had the comments about, the playoff, and I thought that was very interesting. I mean, basically indicating that the SEC and ESPN were working together.
Yep.
Bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, and then trying to shoot this new playoff deal that would benefit, the SEC in particular. They already get the benefit of it, but I mean, he basically said in so many words that the playoff expansion proposal is good, but it was something that they didn't really get into the details of, and it made it sound like it was a little bit fast tracked shortly after the Oklahoma Texas rumblings were going on. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a line